I am going to give you a brief overview of the 5 major religions in the world. When we talk about religion, we are not talking about going to mosque, we are not talking about going to temple, going to church, although that can be an important part of religion. Ultimately, religion is man's attempt to answer questions about things that man can't answer. In other words, we all know that we're in the middle of some big, intense mystery. We can't figure out how the human brain works. We can't figure out how outer space goes on forever. We can't figure out how in the world things in biology just seem to work the way that they do. And so that makes people by nature seek answers to those questions. From the very ancient times, mankind has attempted to answer those questions and to get those questions from what man would call ultimate reality. We kind of refer to that today as God. Okay, our founding fathers referred to it as creator force. Whatever it is out there that we can't explain, religion becomes kind of a path to that. And many different traditions have been built up around these different paths to answer these questions of ultimate reality. If we go to one of the very oldest religions in the world, it is Hinduism. We are going to look at the 5 different major world religions today. So Hinduism will start us off. This is an overall symbol of Hinduism. A person who follows Hinduism believes that there are many forms of one God, and that God kind of manifests himself or herself or themself, itself, through all different kinds of elements of nature and people and so on. A person that follows Hinduism believes in what is called reincarnation, meaning that they go through different cycles of life. They might live once, they might live 500 times. They continually go through these cycles of life, and they die at the end of one life, and then they're born again, generally as another form of Brahman, which is their ultimate God. Karma is the idea that as people go through lives, or as beings go through lives, they collect good or bad karma depending on how they treat others and depending on their works in general. So if a person that follows Hinduism does very good works in one particular life, it will better their station in the next life. Ultimate reality for a person in Hinduism is to arrive essentially at a state of perfect being, what Hindus and eventually Buddhists will call a state of nirvana. That takes us to our second world religion, which is Buddhism. Buddhism was started in India by a man named Siddhartha Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama actually first believed, he was a follower of Hinduism. What he did not like about Hinduism was the caste system that was set up. In other words, when people would go through their reincarnations, some would come back on a very low state in life, others would come back at a much higher state, and those that were at a higher state would not have anything to do with the people at the bottom of the social strata. Okay, those people were called untouchables. So Siddhartha Gautama essentially went out and went on this spiritual path, attempting to find the answers to ultimate reality. And what he came up with was what we call the 4 Noble Truths. Siddhartha Gautama came back and preached to people that there are 4 basic truths about life. And while you don't need to know all of the 4 basic truths, essentially what they mean are that everything in life is suffering. Life, we go through some very tough times in life. We go through sickness of loved ones. We go through things like war, poverty. Life is incredibly tough for people. As a result, the best way to find happiness or to get to ultimate enlightenment, this concept of nirvana, is to follow what is called the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path helps you slowly get rid of your desires. What Siddhartha Gautama said is if you don't have any desires, then you can't be hurt. In other words, if you have no desire to be well, then sickness can't hurt you. And so Siddhartha Gautama said, follow this Eightfold Path. Because of these 4 basic truths, people need to follow this Eightfold Path to get to ultimate enlightenment. And that is the crux of this idea of Buddhism, or this concept of Buddhism. Our third religion takes us over here, and it is Judaism. Judaism, today somebody who follows Judaism would be called a Jewish person. Judaism is the first monotheistic religion. Instead of many of the other religions which came before, many of whom have died out at this point, most of those religions believed that there were many gods, and that those gods were very much like humans, and that those gods were fighting back and forth for the souls of men, or for the allegiance of men. The Jewish people come along, and their religion actually proposes the idea that there is one God. Their founder was a man named Abraham, and he basically, according to the Torah, or according to the Old Testament of what is now the Bible, was approached by God, and when he asked God, "Who are you?" God answered, "I am," meaning, I am it, I am this, and I am the only thing that is this. And so the Jewish people started off this concept of there being only one God, and of that God expecting good, ethical lives of his followers. Okay? And that is the concept of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments are found in the Bible. They are found in the Old Testament of the Bible, and they explain 10 basic things about ways that people should live. Everything from the fact that people should have one God, okay? The people should not worship idols, the people should respect their parents, and so on and so forth. Those are the 10 commandments of ethical living of the Jewish people found in the Torah. Although it is not entirely true, the Torah is actually the first 4 books of the Old Testament, we can, for your purposes, you can know that the Jewish people follow the Old Testament of the Bible. This is where everything that I just told you about Abraham and so on is written down. Following on that tradition was a man named Jesus. We are going into our next religion called Christianity now. Jesus was a Jewish man. He believed everything that was written in the Old Testament, in the Torah, and in the Old Testament of the Bible. He was a Jewish man. He basically became a Jewish priest and was traveling the countryside in what is now Israel, telling people that he was not only a Jewish priest, but that he was also the Son of God, which was equivalent at that time of saying that he was in fact God. So we are now seeing in religion, we are seeing a person come along and say, I am not only representing this or pointing you towards this, I am actually this thing. Okay? What happened was we get all of this about Jesus, these writings of Jesus, from the New Testament of the Bible. Okay? So again, if we look at, remember, Jesus was Jewish, so the Old Testament was already written down explaining things like monotheism and the 10 Commandments and so on. And then Jesus comes along preaching all of that, and the people that wrote down things about him, those writings were gathered in what is called the New Testament of the Bible. Okay, so the Bible today, Christians believe everything that the Jews believe, but they also believe that Jesus was in fact God. Okay, that's where Jews would differ from Christians. Jews would say that the Torah is correct and everything that was written in the Torah and the ethical behavior that is expected of us by God and so on, but they do not believe that Jesus was actually God, which if you think about it is a rather huge claim. Jesus talked quite a bit about life after death, and after Jesus was crucified by the Roman government, it is believed that Jesus rose again or came back, proving this claim that he was the Son of God. That is a matter of belief in terms of whether or not you believe in the writings of the New Testament. About 200 years after Jesus lived, the church gathered all Jesus' church, or those who followed Jesus, gathered all of those who wrote about him while he was alive in what is called this New Testament, and they put the 27 books of the New Testament together. And that is how our modern Bible came to be. The last group is called Muslims, which are followers of Islam. Islam is the name of the religion. The followers are called Muslim. Their leader is a man that lived about 600 years after Jesus. His name was Muhammad, and he lived in what is now Saudi Arabia. He basically saw Jews and Christians crisscrossing across the Arabian Peninsula quite a bit in his life, and he had quite a bit of respect for monotheistic religions, or religions that believed that there was only one ultimate reality or one God. Muhammad went into a cave, according to the Quran, or the writings about Muhammad and his life. He went into a cave and he was approached by the angel Gabriel, and the angel Gabriel explained to him that he was to bring to the people of the Arabian Peninsula and eventually to the world the ideas of Allah. And Muhammad was Allah, or God's last great prophet. People that follow the Islamic religion, Muslims, follow the 5 pillars of Islam, or the 5 things that they are expected to do in their life, much like the 10 Commandments that is expected of the Jews. And the cities that are important to people that follow Islam are Mecca and Medina. They are 2 cities, again, that are on the western coast of the Arabian Peninsula today. Again, they are found in what is now Saudi Arabia today. So one of the 5 pillars, for instance, is that a Muslim person is supposed to pray 5 times a day, and they are supposed to pray facing Mecca, which is where the Kaaba is, which is one of their very holy stones. And so you will see a Muslim 5 times a day praying towards Mecca as part of their religious practice in an attempt to find God.